Nice having you. I did my research about you, and I see that you have not one master, but two.
No, I have 2 degrees. One is a bachelor's and one is the master's degree.
Oh, okay. One, the undergraduate and then the master's.
Yeah.
And then when did you decide to go into comedy? Because, oye mia, we need smart Latinas. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we need
Um,
smart people. It's just you know,
I mean, it's just not what you think it's gonna be. I
right.
mean, I like my job and everything, and the job itself is not the problem. It's
Mhm.
the people who are in charge, you know? And if you're a woman, I was one of 70, like there were 70 people who graduated in my engineering class. I
Mhm.
was the only Latina out of 70 something
Mhm.
people. And there was 10 women in total in the program. And so then
Wow.
you start working and then it's like the same thing. Like I'm the only woman in my department right now. And, people just don't treat you well. There's all this, there's racism and then there's sexism. And so just like those things, like it makes you think like, do I really want to do this?
Right. No, unfortunately, we are, there's a movement of equal pay for Latinas, and we are unfortunately the lowest of the pay scale. And you can follow that hashtag. I follow it too. But I feel you. I get you, because here I am trying to produce, and I go through the same thing. We're banging our heads. We're trying to, you know what I'm saying? We've earned it. We've done everything else, but I hear what you're saying. I applaud you though for getting your education, at least trying. It's more than what I did. I barely finished my undergraduate. So.
Yeah, I guess I didn't know what it was going to be like until I started doing it.
So you always just you did well in school. You've always just been like that smart.
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to be an engineer since I was like 13.
Mhm.
And then I was just like, which kind do I want to be? And then just doing all the classes, being in all the like math and science clubs.
Mhm.
And that was just always the track. And then, I've been working at it for a while now. And then 5 years ago, I was at this big company, like the biggest you could work at, like they've built Olympic stadiums. And I was like, wow, like this is what I should be happy about. And I wasn't happy.
It's funny.
Yeah.
You work, yeah, like, yeah, because sometimes you realize you're like, oh shoot, I did all this work and now it's just not satisfying. Now, how did you exactly get in from comedy? From being, you were like a quiet kid, or?
Um, well, like I didn't really have any friends growing up. I didn't really have
Mhm.
friends till I was like 14.
Mhm.
I was like the weird kid, I guess. Like I didn't know how to socialize with people, so I would say the wrong things, and then they wouldn't want to be my friend, or I think I would try to joke, or if I finally made a friend, I would kind of overdo it,
Mhm.
and then they wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. And so once I finally got friends, then I started, making jokes and seeing that people liked that I was funny.
Mhm.
And then when I went to college, I would be at the parties and they'd be like, tell us a story. Because I was always getting in some kind of trouble. And they thought it was interesting. And I never thought like I wanted to be a comedian.
Mhm.
Like people ask me like, oh, do you know this comedian or that comedian? And I don't know because I didn't grow up watching comedy.
You didn't watch comedy at all?
No.
No, you just was started doing your own open mics in college.
No.
Well,
Then,
literally, it's your own open
oh
mics,
yeah.
because you're like hosting your own open mics. You telling stories.
Yeah, and I had thought like, oh, it would be cool to have a job where I can write stories or something.
Mhm.
But I was like, I don't know if I can write a book. And then I moved back to LA for like that big job that I got.
Right.
And I would go to work, come home, watch TV for 5 hours, go to sleep, do the same thing again. And I was like, this is boring. And so I watched this show, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel,
Mhm.
that I know comics don't like. And I was watching it and I was dating a musician, and I just thought like, oh, that's cool. Like he gets to go and perform, and I go with him, but like I should have something for myself.
Right.
And so I'm watching the show, and it was like the third time watching it, and I started to cry, and I was like, I want to do that. And so I told him, and he was like, you can do that. And I was like, no, I can't. So I went on Google, and I was like, how do you become a comedian?
You did? You went right on Google? Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than what my daughter does sometimes, because she's constantly texting me, how do I do this? How do I? I'm like, Google's your best friend.
Yeah. And so it said, go to an open mic or take improv classes. So I was like, well, I'm not going to the open mic, so I'm going to take the improv classes.
Right.
So I did that for 6 months, and then I finally went to the open mic. It went well, but then I never went back. And then I read the self-help book that was like, what is that dream you want? And how you say yes to other people's like dreams, or you promise them things, but you don't promise yourself.
Right.
Then I thought, well, do I want to be working for someone else's dream, or do I want to work for my own dream? And so I went back to the open mic that same day, and then I just never stopped.
Wow. Wow. And how many years ago was that?
Almost 5.
Wow. So you've been doing this 5 years on top of working a whole nother job too, like a professional
Yeah.
career. Wow. I interviewed a comic on this show who is Indian, who's an engineer like that during the day. So you're not, he's another engineer, but you're my second engineer comic I have literally interviewed. So where did you go to college?
UC Irvine.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you stood in the SoCal area.
Yeah.
You stood in the little area that's still familiar to you. So you weren't too.
Yeah, I was within like 45 minutes away.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad. Some people go to college and like, you know what I'm saying? When you're Latino and you go in the middle of the country, that's a trip. That's you know what I'm saying? That's a totally different experience, but you were right there at UC Irvine. Wow. So that's just amazing. And but you've never through the years watched any comedians or anything like that? Or
I mean, I didn't know that they were comedians.
Mhm.
Like I watched old SNL episodes, and it's like you see Will Ferrell and like all these like Adam Sandler, and I was like, what? They were on this show? Like I didn't watch SNL, so I didn't know like what it was. And then, the people who I think are funny on TV, to know that they started off as comedians, I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, and then you're in the right area. You're right in LA, so everything's right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But that's great. So you are I watched your TikToks a lot, and I see that you get a lot of material off your parents.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about my dating life. I talk about my parents. I mean, sometimes they just say things that I think are funny.
What do they say when you made this switch or this change? Well, you're not really switching. You're still doing it. But what do they have to say about everything?
Well, I try not to tell them.
Oh, okay.
So eventually they found out.
Oh.
Somebody told them. I wasn't going to tell them anything because I knew it was not going to be positive.
Right.
And it wasn't. My mom was just like, well, don't quit your job. And then they've never actually seen me perform in English. But when I got to be on TV, they saw me perform because it was on TV and it was in Spanish. And then once that happened, like it kind of switched for her. And now she's like a fan, and she'll be like, do you have a show today? How did your show go? Blah, blah, blah. But before, she was against it.
She was against it. Were you living with your family or no when that happened?
No.
Oh, okay. Because living with them would be a different story, sneaking out. So go imagine the stuff they would, how Latino parents are like,